I've done over 250 fantasy football drafts at this point, and here are my most drafted running backs by every single round. Starting off round one, we are going to have Bijan Robinson. Now, I will say, yes, I'm very biased. You already know it by now. I went to the University of Texas. I interviewed him at the NFL draft. I ran into him at the gym about a month ago. So yeah, I am taking Bijan Robinson because the number one rule in fantasy football is you play to have fun. We play to take guys that we want to root for. And that's what I'm doing with Bijan, who I've drafted in 9.9% of fantasy leagues. But in reality, the main reason I'm going Bijan Robinson is he is one of the very few running backs round one that you're not having to worry about his age. If we go over and look at underdog drafts right now to look at these round one running backs, you had Christian McCaffrey drafted in 2017. This is a running back that now is going into year 6, year 7 of his NFL career. You had Austin Eckler in that same 2017 draft class. Eckler's 28 years old. I mean, Bijan Robinson's the only round one running back that you're not having to worry about that with. Bijan Robinson's the best running back prospect we've had since Saquon Barkley. The only running back we've seen be as good as Bijan from a prospect standpoint since the year 2014 was Leonard Fournette. Now, yes, I understand recently rookie running backs drafted in round one of fantasy drafts have disappointed. I know everybody's going to go back to what we had in 2020 when Clyde Edwards-Helaire went in round one and was horrible. Gave you nothing and was the biggest bust in that round outside of Michael Thomas that season. But nonetheless, let's take a step back, right? Let's just ignore Clyde Edwards-Helaire for a second. What other running backs had all the hype in the world going into their rookie season? And what did they do year one? Well, Saquon Barkley had all that hype. He was being drafted in round one his rookie season. He was the running back 2 overall. Leonard Fournette had a ton of hype. He was the running back 7 overall. Ezekiel Elliott, a ton of hype. He was the running back 3. Adrian Peterson, a ton of hype, and he was the running back 5. So outside of that one instance of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was undeservingly pushed up to round one of fantasy football drafts, we've historically seen that rookie running backs can have success. If you go over and look at the player props you have with Bijan Robinson right now on Underdog, he has 8.5 rushing touchdowns, about 1,100 rushing yards, and 4.5 games with 100 or more rushing yards. I understand as a rusher, he looks similar with these player props to someone that you have such as Josh Jacobs, a player we'll talk about in just one second. But another reason I'm fine taking Bijan Robinson in round one is the receiving down skill set. This is a running back that this past year at Texas went out there and had over 300 receiving yards off of 19 receptions. Yes, the man averaged 16.5 yards per reception. He's not just getting dump offs out of the backfield. He runs real routes. I mean, hell, he could probably be a slot wide receiver if he really wanted to. I mean, you see the videos right now in Atlanta Falcons training camp of him going out there and him putting on a show against defensive backs. Now, our round 2 RB is going to be Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, we've drafted in 16.7% of drafts, and Barkley has moving up, right? I mean, a lot of these drafts, we were taking him at the very end of the second round when people were worried about the contract situation. Now you're going to have to take Saquon Barkley at the beginning of the second round. He has an ADP of 17.1 on Underdog, directly behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, as well as Devontae Adams. But honestly, I would rather have Saquon Barkley over all those wide receivers. I would rather have him over Nick Chubb, the running back that he's going ahead of. This past season, Saquon Barkley was the running back 5 from a points per game perspective. He had a market share rate as a rusher from a 60% carry perspective, and he had a 15% team target share on a per game basis. Both of those are numbers that we want to look for. It's a running back that's not too old. It's not like he's going into his age 28 season. He was 25 this past year. And if we put into the year that he just had in the Rotoviz screener and look at all running backs that had a comparable 25-year-old season since the year 2000, you had DeMarco Murray in 2013. The following year, he scored 22.6 fantasy points per game. You had Frank Gore in 2008. And the following season, he scored 20.2 fantasy points per game. You had Work Done in 2000. The next year, he scored 15.7. And you had Ezekiel Elliott in 2020. The following season, he scored 14.8. So the floor for Saquon Barkley looks like a mid-running back 2 in fantasy. And the ceiling for Saquon Barkley looks like a top 3 running back. Right now, if we go over and look at his player prop on Underdog, this is a running back that they currently have sitting at 7.5 rushing touchdowns, 1,100 rushing yards, 3.5 100-yard rushing games. So, I mean, I really like Barkley. I'm going to continue to draft him even with this price going up. Now, someone that's been falling is Josh Jacobs. Jacobs has a lot of uncertainty, right? I mean, this is a running back that led the NFL in rushing this past season, but you're getting him in round 3 of fantasy football drafts at this point. And with Josh Jacobs, I'm very biased, similar to Bijan Robinson. He was my most drafted player in fantasy football last year. Y'all know I won $150,000 in Underdog drafts last season, and Jacobs was a pretty big reason on that front. But of course, real quick side note, if y'all want to go check out any of those player props you're seeing in this video, or if you want to get into a draft with us, we are drafting every single day on the live stream in Underdog Fantasy drafts. They're best ball, so no time commitment at all during the season. So I drafted over 700 teams last year. And if you sign up to Underdog with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you're going to get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com where you can find our 2023 fantasy football draft guide, and you can check out all those player props. My favorite player prop right now is going to be Drake London for more receiving touchdowns than Michael Gallup. But if we go back to Josh Jacobs, he was 24 years old this past season. And if we look at the road of his screener to look at all running backs that had a similar type of year at 24 years old, you had Sean Alexander in 2001. The following year, he had over 20 fantasy points per game. You had Steven Jackson in 2007. The following season, 19 points per game. Adrian Peterson in 2009. The following season, 18.5 points. MJD, 2009, the following season, 17. Travis Henry, 2002, the following season, 16.5. Ezekiel Elliott, 2019, the following season, 15.5. So very similar to what we were looking at previously. I think that with Josh Jacobs, you have a floor of a mid running back 2, a ceiling of a high-end RB1, and I believe Jacobs plays this next season. We're seeing that these running backs don't have a lot of leverage right now. Now, our round 4 guy is going to be Travis Etienne. With Travis Etienne, yes, Tank Bigsby will have a role. I'm the first person to admit it. I understand they did not draft Tank Bigsby in round 3 for him to just sit there and look pretty on the sidelines. He will be involved and he will play some. But you never draft Travis Etienne expecting that he's going to have 90 to 100% of the carries in this Jacksonville Jaguars backfield. What you want to see from Travis Etienne is a similar workload to what you have with Saquon Barkley. You want to see him to get up to about 65% of this team's carries on a per game basis, and you want to see a target share number over 10%. Now, the issue with Travis Etienne is this past season, he wasn't really involved as a pass catcher. He only had 2.5 targets per game. He only had a 7.5% team target share mark, which isn't great, right? But at Clemson, Travis Etienne, his final season, averaged 4 receptions a game. This is a running back that can be involved as a pass catcher. And what I am most encouraged about is looking at the press conferences that you have in Jacksonville right now. Travis Etienne, speaking on the running back contract situation, is stating it clearly. He is saying, if you're a running back and you want to get paid, you have to be a great receiver. You have to get involved in the passing game because that's what NFL teams care about. So I am assuming that Etienne has been working on his receiving down skill set. I'm assuming that Travis Etienne is going to be more involved as a pass catcher this next year, and it's an elite level offense. Etienne's still on his rookie deal. Now, round 5, we are going to be looking at Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker opened up Underdog drafts this offseason, going at the end of the 3rd round, and I said I would never draft him. But round 5, it's a different story, right? He was my 2nd most drafted running back last year, only behind Josh Jacobs. He crushed it for us. This was a running back that finished as the running back 17 from a points per game perspective. But you have to remember, this is someone that didn't have that large of a workload through the first month of the season. So if we remove the first month of the season and look at running backs that outscored Kenneth Walker from a points per game perspective, you had Austin Eckler, you had Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, James Conner, Joe Mixon, Saquon Barkley, Ramondre Stevenson. Kenneth Walker was a rookie. This is a running back that had 15.5 carries per game, 81 total yards per game, and this should be a very good offense this next year. Now, I am worried about one thing, not going to lie to you. I am worried about the involvement of Zach Charbonnet. I think Zach Charbonnet actually has a receiving down role in this offense, And in my mind, with the healthy Zach Charbonnet, it's going to cap the overall ceiling for Kenneth Walker. I don't think Kenneth Walker can be a top 5 running back in fantasy outside of an injury to Charbonnet. But with that being said, round 5 is a completely fair price point to go ahead and take that swing. If you're looking at where he's getting drafted in underdog drafts right now, I mean, he's directly behind Christian Kirk, Brandon Ayuk, directly ahead of Deontay Johnson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and yeah, I'll take a running back in this range. Now, going down to our next guy, we are going to be looking at another player I thought I wasn't going to draft early on. Miles Sanders opened up drafts in April, going at the end of the 4th round. But now we're getting Miles Sanders in the 6th round in underdog drafts, and I haven't stopped taking him. I've had him in about 13.1% of our drafts so far. This past year, nothing great. Here's the running back 22 from a points per game perspective. But what I am most encouraged with when it comes to Miles Sanders is the contract the Carolina Panthers give him. They go ahead and they give him $13 million guaranteed. Please go look at all running backs that signed a deal this offseason and find someone else that got this kind of money. This contract tells me that the Carolina Panthers view Miles Sanders as that 3-down back. We know that there are previous coaching ties from Philadelphia now to Carolina. So it almost doesn't matter what we saw last year in this Philadelphia Eagles offense. If you're looking at the receiving down usage, I think it's going to see a massive spike up with Bryce Young rather than Jalen Hurts with the new coaching staff. And yeah, I'm fine taking him ahead of Cam Akers. Honestly, I can't believe people are taking Akers over Sanders. Now, going over to our next guy, Javonte Williams, round 7 is going to be someone that continues to move up these rankings. Now, a lot of people were making fun of us when we were taking Javonte Williams in underdog drafts. And back then, I was saying, yeah, he'll probably miss the beginning of the season, but I'm drafting him here because, we're in an underdog tournament that's a $25 buy-in, $3 million first place prize. I need to swing for the fences. Javonte Williams, pick 100. Nobody else has that type of upside. Well, come to find out that Javonte's not missing the beginning of the season. Javonte Williams is going to be playing in the preseason, ladies and gentlemen. You have Sean Payton, and I understand there's some Samaje Perine stands. I understand a lot of people like Samaje Perine for whatever reason. And yeah, you got to see him in the NFL playoffs this past year. So I understand everybody views him in a special light. But if you look at Samaje Perine, the only time Perine has had over 100 carries in an NFL season was 2017. 2017 as a rookie for the Washington Redskins. I do not get the appeal of a 28-year-old Samaje Perine who has seen 100 carries once in his NFL career. Javonte Williams will most likely see about 60 to 70% of this backfield, which should be enough to be a contributor in fantasy football, even if Perine gets 30%. Now, our next guy is going to be a little bit tougher. I have drafted a ton of Alvin Kamara. If y'all remember, we are getting him past pick 100 in underdog drafts. And generally, if it's a $5 buy-in, $75,000 first place prize, I'm going with the uncertainty and I'm chasing the ceiling. Now, Alvin Kamara has risen up draft boards and they just added in Kareem Hunt. So I'm a little bit more hesitant to say that Alvin Kamara should continue to rise with the great news that he is only suspended for 3 weeks this next season. But what I do want to point out with Alvin Kamara and why we've been drafting him so much this offseason is the target share in this offense. He's averaged almost a 19% team target share over the past 3 seasons. While yes, this past year he wasn't great in fantasy, it was because the touchdowns fell off a cliff. We know touchdowns are the most volatile statistic in fantasy football. He only averaged 0.27 touchdowns per game this past year in comparison to 1.31 touchdowns per game back in 2020. In reality, the usage wasn't that different. He saw the same amount of touches overall. So what you just want to see is you want to see some positive touchdown regression for Alvin Kamara. And it's great news that he's only going to be suspended for 3 weeks. Now, our next guy will be Dalvin Cook, and I understand, yes, we're just going with the risky guys at this point. I get it. I know that y'all probably hate it, but if we go and look at where Dalvin Cook is getting drafted right now in fantasy football drafts, Dalvin Cook in underdog drafts is going behind Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, and going directly before Cortland Sutton, Rashad Bateman, Michael Thomas. If you are in a Best Ball Mania draft where it's a $25 buy-in in a $15 billion prize pool, who has a higher ceiling? Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, Rashad Bateman, Michael Thomas, Cortland Sutton, or Dalvin Cook? Dalvin Cook may find himself with the Jets. He may find himself with the Patriots. He may find himself with the Dolphins. He may find himself with the Cowboys. But in my mind, there are very, very, very few landing spots that Dalvin Cook finds himself in and does not move up fantasy football draft boards. Now, full transparency, Dalvin Cook is a declining player. Dalvin Cook is no longer a top 5 running back in the NFL. Anybody who says so is a clown. But with that being said, I mean, hell, he was the running back 15 this past year from a points per game perspective. And if I get him after Kadarius Toney, I will be drafting him. Now, our next guy we have on this list, someone that I expected to not really draft at all, but Brian Robinson right now is being drafted in the same range as Tyler Boyd, Odell Beckham Jr., Nico Collins, and Samaje Perine. Yes, Brian Robinson only averaged 1 target per game this past year. He is not a pass catcher, and we want to be drafting running backs that have access to a high ceiling in the receiving down world. But with that being said, Brian Robinson as a rookie averaged 17.1 carries per game after getting shot. Let's recap this. He was shot with a gun, and then the following year, his first year in the NFL, he averages over 17 carries per game. This Washington backfield sees J.D. McKissic leave, so there are more touches available now than there were. And we are going to have him next to Tyler Boyd. We're going to have him next to Odell Beckham Jr. We're going to have him next to Samaje Perine and Nico Collins. I get that he doesn't catch passes, but what are we doing here? Now, I think that's all I have for y'all in this video. Again, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I really hope that you enjoyed it. And of course, if you did, go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to get in a fantasy football draft, we are drafting literally every single night on Underdog Fantasy on this live stream. And if you sign up to Underdog with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. You're going to get our 2023 fantasy football rankings. You're going to get a free trial to flockfantasy.com, where you can also find our 2023 fantasy football draft guide. Underdog's available in damn near every state. They also have all the player props you saw in this video. And like I said, my favorite player prop right now is Drake London for more receiving touchdowns than Michael Gallup this next year. That's all I got for you. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Really do appreciate you, and really hope I get to see you with the live stream later tonight.